when you were growing up, you always heard people talk about football. They would talk about like the way it was when I was younger, or a coach, the way it was when I was coming up. You're not coming up. I mean, you're established now. But let's say 15 years down the road, some of your players are trying to tell the story of what it was like when they played. You're trying to tell the story of what it was like. How do you even tell the story? Because you've been a head coach a few years here. None of those 2 years have been the same. And I don't mean your record. I mean the rules, the structure of the sport, the calendar. 20 years from now, someone asks, hey, Coach Lashlee, what was it like when you were a young coach? And you just got to ask which month of which year, I guess.
At the rate our sport's evolving, I don't know what it would look like in 20 years. And to your point, I've been coaching 3 years. All 3 years have been completely different rules of engagement to the game, how the portal works, how NIL works, how the rules of the game work. The day I got hired, basically of December 1 of 22, was the first December we had, true NIL and an unlimited transfer. That was my first month on the job, and so welcome to it. And so it's changed a lot. I was talking with Mac Brown just last year, and he said, man, the game has changed more in the last 2 to 3 years than it did in my first 40. And he's right. Some of those changes are great, but, change can be good if there's some planning behind it and some structure behind it. And right now we're struggling to have structure behind it.
Don't you have to be a little compartmentalized in a sense that there's part of you who loves the game, and you're just a fan of the game? That part of you probably wants to scream about some stuff. But then you're also the head coach of a major program, and it's not your job to be negative. It's your job to be positive. It's your job to take the situation at hand and guide your program the best you can. You don't have time to complain. I mean, people like me can afford to just do one of those things. You kind of got to put away that human side, more the natural side, and you just got to steer the ship. And even if it's foggy all around and you can't really tell where you're going, you got to just steer the best you can.
Yeah, well, I have a saying, you can't complain because nobody'd listen.
Right.
Nobody'd care. It is, as a coach, your job is to solve problems. That's all you do. I mean, whether it's problems in game, nonstop, you're just figuring out how to fix things, how to solve things. So that's what we do as coaches. And in a lot of ways in our sport right now, the coaches, we're just catching all the challenges and just figuring out the way to handle them the best we can. Because we don't have a big voice. We don't have a lot of say in what happens. But we're the boots on the ground. We're the ones coaching. We're the ones living it day in, day out with our players. So it is a challenge. On one hand, yes, the person who loves the game, just I love college football. I love the game. It's the best game in the world. It's the best team sport there is. It's a great teacher of life. So many of us coach because of what it did for us. So yeah, the I love the game person in me definitely would want to scream. I care about the players that I coach. I still call them kids, but the young men that we get to recruit and coach, we desperately care about them and what's best for them both now and in the long term, regardless of what people think. At the same time, those two things can be true, and the number one thing is I'm hired to win. I'm hired to win now with the rules that have been given to me. And a lot of times those three things don't line up right now. And so that's the challenge as a coach is how do you lead your program? How do you lead a winning program? That's what you're hired to do. That's your job. And that's what we do as coaches is solve problems and figure out different ways to do things. At the same time, care about your kids, care about the love of the game, and want to help sustain or maintain the things that make this game great. Because I do have concerns about the well-being of our young men that we're coaching now, 5, 10, 15 years from now, based on the way the game is today.
There's so much cynicism out there. Anytime a guy who's making life-changing money to coach the sport says, I'm looking out for the best interest of the players, there's a portion of the public who just calls BS on it. And they say, man, you're not looking out for the best interest of players, you're looking out for your own best interest. You have to sit down with guys, you have to sit down with families, and you have to dispel that. And then you have to sometimes tell a guy, don't be penny wise, pound foolish in what you chase. Make 40-year decisions instead of maybe 4-year, 4-month decisions. How hard and how much harder are those conversations sometimes now with the way the landscape has evolved, has of course brought in new challenges?
It is hard, and there is a public opinion out there about that is tough. I mean, here's what I tell you. I've coached 18 years now, and I wasn't making life-changing money for the first 15 of it. I was making good money. I was able to feed my family. I was living well, but I wasn't making that kind of money, as you would say. You earn it. You start with as a GA making nothing, or you start with your first job making a couple, $50,000, $60,000, and you work your way to those opportunities. You hope you earn it, or sometimes you're fortunate and blessed, and maybe you're just in the right place at the right time. But it doesn't change the fact that we all need to learn how to grow and struggle and earn things. And look, I think me and all coaches want our players to get everything they can. College football is the best game out there. It's never been more popular, and it's a big business now. It's a massive industry, billions of dollars. Yeah, those guys are the product. They deserve to share in that. I don't think any of us would try to take that from them. But how do we do it in a way that teaches them life, reality, to help them be better? I don't worry as much about what other people would think. There's certain things that if you say, people will really criticize you and they don't maybe know your heart. I worry about the players I'm dealing with, the kids we're recruiting, what they think. If they know I care about them, then I'm good. And hopefully you just live your life in a way and you carry yourself in a way everyone else will get it. And if they don't, I'm a coach. There's a lot of people who don't like my 3rd and 8 calls, so I've got to have pretty thick skin.
You just said something there. So you said as long as you know your heart and as long as your kids know your heart,
yeah,
you can do without what everyone else thinks. So that applies to you as a coach. It applies to them as players. It also applies to everyone who will watch this or listen to this. Really, it's applicable in their life as well.
Mm-hmm.
How life-changing is it when you can get someone to the point where you sort of, for lack of a better term, make what other people think none of your business? The ones who matter know, and then you take comfort in the fact that if my real ones know where my heart is, I can just kind of put noise-cancellating headphones on everything else.
It's where you want to be. It's the only way you can live with some peace and happiness and true joy. It's hard though, because we care what people think about us. You know what I mean? In this day and age when everything's on social media and our kids are even more bombarded by that. And I think that's kind of why we are where we are is, look, we're the adults in the room, we being the coaches and the people that are making all the rules and things that are affecting college football. And it's our job to be good stewards of the game, but also, most importantly, do what's best for our players. Doesn't mean we give them everything that either they think they want or people think they should have. What's best for them? Yes, they should have the ability to earn money based on their name, image, and likeness and what they do for a sport that has grown in a massive way in terms of the industry. Yes, they should have the ability to have some freedom to transfer. If a coach can leave, they should have some freedom. But there's still rules from a coach leaving. There's contracts, there's buyouts. Like, you don't just pick up and leave every 6 months with no consequences, right? That's the real world. And so how do we do that and find that balance? I think that's where the adults have to come back into the room. It's no different than me raising my kids. I've always said my kids would have ice cream for breakfast, lunch, and dinner if I'd let them. That's what they want. They don't know that's not what's best for them long term. Mom and dad do. That's our job. So how do we give them joy, give them happiness, give them love, give them what they deserve, but at the same time, raise them and prepare them for the future? That's where we are right now in college football. We've got a little bit of an issue of any coach will tell you, man, I want my players to have everything they can have. I also want, when they're 27, 28, 29, and 30, and they're married and they have 2 kids, them to be successful and to have learned the lessons in our great game that have helped them. Because maybe 1% are going to have a second NFL contract. Most of them are going to be successful in other things. Are we preparing them for that?
You guys just had a hugely successful season here. You end up playing for a conference championship. You go to the playoff, and yet you had virtually no staff turnover. Normally it's the opposite. Normally, if you achieve at a high level, you're constantly having your assistants poached left and right. I got to assume guys had offers. And I've got to assume they stayed here because you've actually created something that they want to be a part of. Now, you've heard the word culture ever since the day you picked up a football, but now you implement one. What kind of culture have you implemented here? How rewarding is it? Or maybe how validating is it when you look around and you say, man, we got kind of everyone coming back again?
It's fun. It's a lot more fun than having to replace everybody. Culture is a big deal. It's a buzzword in our world, in our industry, but it matters. Team culture, staff culture matters. To some degree, culture is what you allow or tolerate, but also culture is just the norms and the things that make up, what you believe in. And as a staff, I believe life's about relationships and life's about people. Our staff believes that, which also bleeds into our team. You can't have a healthy team with a good culture if you don't have a healthy staff, because that all bleeds downhill. And I credit our staff for creating the culture. We've got good people, not only on the field, we got great support staff and recruiting and operations and player development and on and on and on, people that aren't on the front lines and don't get all the glory. We've got a group of people that we want to be just honest, genuine, transparent. This is who we are. We're not perfect, but we're all in this together. And we spend time together as a staff. And so it's good when you can win. Guys are getting jobs offered, deservedly so, and they're taking stock personally, what's best for me and my family, and we think right now it's best to stay, and we want to stay. As a head coach, that's the culture you want to have. We're blessed to have it. Now we have to fight for it every day and defend it to keep it. And we're also not naive. If we can continue to win, guys are going to get opportunities. But as a leader, if guys leave this program because they're getting a better opportunity, then that's what you want. Johnny Brewer and I had been together for 11 years. Johnny Brewer was our quarterback's coach our first 2 years here, and he got a chance to go be an offensive coordinator for Manny at Duke. It was a no-brainer. We celebrated him as he went. Those are the kind of moves you want people to be able to make when they leave your program. And until then, you want to make it as hard as you can, or as hard as you can on them to leave.
You've coached many different places. You've worked under many different guys. I got to assume along the way you saw a lot of stuff and you said, if I ever got my own program, I'm going to do this. Maybe more importantly, you saw some stuff where you said, if I got my program one day, it will not be like that. So, generally, as you can possibly speak, what are some of those things on each side of the equation where you've kind of observed it along the way and said, yes in the future, no in the future?
Man, I'll tell you, a lot of things, you have this idea of, one day when I'm a head coach, I'm going to do this, and then you get the job, and in the first 2 weeks, you just throw all that out the window, and you're just trying to keep your head above water. You're right. You learn how to do a lot of things, and you learn how not to do a lot of things, and that's just part of the growth process. I've been blessed to work for some awesome head coaches in my career. I played and worked for Houston Nutt. Everyone knows my relationship and time with Gus Malzahn, Gene Chizik, Pat Sullivan, Randy Edsall, Sonny Dykes, Manny Diaz. There's a lot of Coach of the Year awards in that group. And so I've learned how to do a lot of things from them. The thing I think that's important to me, and the two things that I don't ever want to be, when I said I'm going to be a head coach, and even now after doing it for 3 years, I want to be non-negotiable, is I'm going to have a relationship with my staff, outside of football. And our families, as much as they're willing, are going to be close, and our wives are going to know each other. I know a lot of coaches that don't do that because they're like, well, don't get too close because if you have to fire them, it makes it harder. You know what? You're probably right. The goal is not to have to do those things, but if you have to, then those things will handle themselves. But we're gonna enjoy what we do and who we do it with while we're doing it. It's really too hard to do it any other way. And the second thing I'll say is with the players, we are still going to be about relationships and driven with our players, even in a day and age where they make a ton of money in the transfer portal and you're not really program building anymore, you're team building every year. I don't know any other way to do it because the fundamentals of our game haven't changed. You can coach them as hard as you're willing to love them, and they do not care deep down what we are telling them and doing if they don't know we love them and care about them. And so those are two things I don't ever want to compromise. I want to make sure that the people on our staff and in our building, they know at bare minimum I care about them and I'm trying to do the best I can for them, even if it doesn't always work out that way. And I don't ever want a player to come through this program, whether they transfer out early or whether they graduate and leave, and not know, I may not have agreed with what Coach did, or I may not have liked this or liked that, but I know he cared about me, and that's the most important thing to me.
You probably got guys sitting in your office all the time. Maybe coaches, definitely players. And they're at various low points in their life. Mm-hmm. They're looking for someone to listen to them. But also, if I'm talking to the authority figure in the building, I want to know he can relate to what I'm going through. If I'm going through the worst part of my career, professionally or scholastically, what are some of the things you draw on? What are some of the stories you tell guys about your playing or coaching career? And you say, hey, I can't relate exactly, but trust me, I generally know how you feel because fill in the blank.
Yeah, you always are trying to find a way to identify and not necessarily say, I totally get it, but build a little bit of a connection that I've been in a similar situation you're in that worked out okay, and let me help you through that. Because when you're going through something tough in life, whether you're a player or just any of us, when you're in the middle of the storm, you can never see outside of in front of your face because it just seems everything is right on top of you. It seems terrible, and you can't truly appreciate that there is something on the other side of it. And a lot of times you're learning things that you didn't know are going to help you later in life in this difficult situation, because adversity makes us all better. And so trying to explain to someone, hey, you're going through this, whether it's with your family, personally with you, things you're struggling with, disappointments, playing time, whatnot, any range of things they're struggling with, you want to identify with them to where you can say, look, I've been in a similar situation. I know it's hard right now, and I know you can't see the other side of this, but you're going to come out on the other side of it. And when you do, 5, 10, 15 years from now, you're going to look back and remember this time and go, wow, that time actually made me better. And if I was in charge of my life, I'd have pulled myself right out of it, but thank God I wasn't, and I got left in the middle of this yuck and this thing I didn't like. But when you're older and you've been through those experiences, you can have those conversations and hope to show them, look, I've been through this, this, and this. I didn't understand it then. This is how it worked out for me. Okay, now in the moment, let's just worry about today. What can we do to make it a little better right now? How can we help you get through this time you're struggling with, instead of trying to, find ways just out. We all want out, but how do we thrive through the adversity to where one day it truly made us better and served the purpose that it was there for?
No, this concept now. So being able to be the director or the producer of your life and watching it play out and knowing if I was in charge, I would have pulled the plug at various points. I know where I'd go in my life. Like I'd go back to local news days and you're making nothing and you don't know if anyone's watching. It's local news too, so it's not really fun. Are there like specific points in your timeline where you go back and you look and you say, there's a dot, there's a dot, there's a dot. Yeah, I'm glad I wasn't in charge. Lever would have been pulled right there.
100%. 100%. I'm glad God's in charge of my life, because if I was, I wouldn't be sitting right here. From when I was a player, I was a really good high school player. I went to college. I didn't amount to much. My claim to fame is I was a backup to Matt Jones at Arkansas. And I tore my shoulder up and did this and did that. It didn't work out how I wanted to. Looking back, I can see why I went through some of those experiences. Maybe some of the decisions I made that contributed to it as well. Thinking more maybe easily relatable currently is as a coach. I'm 29 when I get to be the OC at Auburn. We win the kick six. I'm 30 when we're playing Florida State for a national championship game. I'm a Broyles Award finalist. And for the next 8 or 9 years, everybody just assumes I'm going to be a head coach. I'd like to be a head coach. I interview every year for a head job. I'm not getting head jobs. Now fast forward to 2016, we're 4 years in. We go to the Sugar Bowl, but it's just not working, and I need to go out and do it on my own. Well, really the only option that I go to Connecticut. Everybody's like, what are you doing? What's going on? I'm probably thinking the same thing. That year at Connecticut, we went 3-9. We weren't very good. Offensively we got better, but we didn't win a lot of games. In that moment, I'm sitting here questioning, why am I doing this? I'm like, hey, maybe I should just, I told my wife on several occasions, maybe I should just get out. I coached in 2011 at Stanford. I coached a set of twins. Their dad works for Chick-fil-A. Maybe I can go get a Chick-fil-A somewhere. They make good livings. They only work 6 days a week, and that line's always long, and it's always a pleasure, right? So maybe we can do that, make a good living, enjoy our family. We don't need all this. In those moments, you're in the middle of it, and you can't see past the adversity. But now sitting here, 3 years into being a head coach, I know why I needed to go through those steps. I can look back now, I wouldn't have then, see why I needed that season at Auburn. I needed that year at Connecticut. I needed for Sonny to bring me here to SMU for 2 years. I needed to go to Miami and do that. I needed those steps to better prepare me for this, and I didn't know it at the time. And I think it's helped me be a better head coach when I did get that opportunity. And again, if I was in charge, I'd have probably been a head coach somewhere else sooner. Instead, I'm blessed to be the head coach at SMU at a perfect time to be the head coach at SMU. It just all worked out. But in the middle of 2016, 2017, if I was in charge, I'd have just pulled myself out and put me at this school and said, let's go show everybody what you can do. I needed that process in that time, and I would have never known it in the moment.
When I was growing up, I remember literally saying prayers when I was 16. There's this girl I like. And I remember praying, hey, if you just give me one call in life, I'm using it right now. I'm calling it in.
And she's it. Yeah.
Did not work. And of course, in retrospect, you're glad it didn't work.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I remember thinking to myself professionally, everyone wants their big break. Everyone's looking for their big break. And I remember 2016, 17, 18, I'm just fully convinced, man, it's time for my big break. It didn't come. thank God it didn't come. And so then it does come later on, and you learn what you didn't know because you couldn't have known it. And then you see which doors are open 3 years down the road that didn't even exist 3 years prior, so it wasn't time yet. And all the while, you realize that, okay, but this right here, Lord willing, is not the final chapter of my book. So even now, I'm probably sitting here wishing for things and asking for things that I'm not ready for. So it's not just like I'm infinitely wise now and all that's in the past. It's in the present still. Some of it's in the future because you're not sitting here talking to me in your early 90s. You're talking to me in your early 40s. And so when you kind of look at the rest of your career, how much does that guide you to know that it's unknown, man? I'm just going to sit in the here and now, but at least I'm not totally ignorant to the ways of the world anymore.
Well, I think having that experience gives you the perspective to then when the challenges come again in the 40s, you go, okay, this isn't fun.
Right.
I don't enjoy this, but I've been here in some version before. I know if I can just push through this, it may be for a good reason, or it may just be part of life, right? And so I think the hardest thing for me and probably anyone else is how do I have goals and big dreams and things I want to accomplish? Because you got to have it. If you don't have it, without vision, you're going nowhere. At the same time, live and be present in the moment. And that is so hard to do. Like, I'll never forget in 2011, Pat Sullivan had hired me to be the OC at Sanford. I was 27. I have no idea why he hired me, other than we just won a national title. And I was at Auburn, so that all connected for him. But I didn't do it, right? And he's given me a first-time OC job at 27. I didn't know. I thought I knew what I was doing. And I had it all ironed out, right? I'm going to go there, and, hey, we're going to they scored 17 points a game. We're going to be so much better. And, man, in 2 years I'll be the OC at this school. In 3 years I'll be the head coach there. And I remember sitting in my office that June. No one was there. And I just kind of looked out. My boys were not even a year old yet, so I had twin boys born, been married a couple years. I'm the OC at Sanford. Nobody really knew where I was, and I could make mistakes, but I didn't know that yet. I remember just thinking, God just allowed me to have this piece of perspective for a moment. I said, how cool is this? You're 27. You're getting to call offensive plays for a former Heisman winner. You like living in Birmingham. You got healthy. Just enjoy it. And I did. And I didn't mean to, but by 29, I was OC at Auburn, right? But I didn't think for the next 2 years about, man, I just got to go get that. And that's so hard. It's so hard for kids to do. It's hard for adults to do, is how can I stay present? Because the reality is, if I don't do a good job with where I am right now, nothing else is going to happen.
That's one of the great struggles of being process-oriented, though, of being the process-oriented person who's always about, what it takes to achieve, and you got mid-tier and big-tier long-term goals, but at the same time, happiness can sometimes be an enemy of that, because you almost think happiness is an illusion. I'm not supposed to sit here and look around. I'm not supposed to smile. I'm not supposed to take a deep breath. I got to keep going. You can do both, but is it sometimes not hard? You're describing that right now. You were happy in your late 20s. You weren't where you were headed, but you were happy in your late 20s, and sometimes you got to know you can kick your feet up for a little while. Not indefinitely, but you can take a look around, maybe even dare to give yourself a quick pat on the back, as long as no one's looking.
Yeah.
And then you get back to work.
I do think you have to give yourself credit when credit is due. And when you have successes, you have to take a moment, appreciate it, celebrate it, but also humbly appreciate maybe how hard it was to get there. Others helped you, and know that it's fleeting. I think anybody in our business who gets the guru bird on their shoulder 2 or 3 years later, they're almost out of the business. It's crazy, right? And so, I think at the end of the day, I just have to be comfortable, and any of us do, to be able to stay present, which is a daily struggle for any of us, and not kind of have strategy drift or get your mind so far off that you lose focus of the here and now, thinking about what could be. Is you just have to be comfortable knowing you're not the author of your story. You can't control the future as much as we want to. And so it's man, let's enjoy where we are now. My wife and I felt that way. Our boys are turning 14. We've lived in 10 homes in 14 years. So we've moved plenty. And every move has been a good move, but also a hard move, because we were leaving behind people we cared about. But we also weren't scared to dive in where we were and create relationships and try to get some deep roots, knowing that they're going to get ripped out at some point, and that's not going to be fun. But that's the only way to live. And so that's what we do the best we can, but it is hard.
The coaching existence is about as close to the military family existence, I think, as you can get, in a sense that you get calloused to moving. And you move in, and sometimes you look at a box and you say, why even unpack this? We're going to pack it right back up in 36 months, 48 months. Why even get to know the neighbors? It's just going to make it harder to say goodbye. I mean, do you ever sort of, over the course of 10 moves, start to develop a mentality like that?
Well, and that's the callousing you got to guard against. And it's so easy to happen to us, right? We just took this new job, but we're not going to get too close to everybody because we know we're just going to move. And that's just no way to live your life, right? But yeah, I mean, there's been a couple moves after the third move. I'm like, that box was from 3 moves ago. We probably just need to get rid of it. We haven't really needed it lately, you know what I mean? And to your point, you kind of get this itch like we're starting our 4th season here. We have no intention to move. We don't want to move, but we're moving houses within Dallas. We're moving 3 miles in the next month. Why? Probably just because that 2 or 3 year window, we feel like we're supposed to move. And to your point, you know, people always sometimes, when you compare it to the military, it has nothing comparison in terms of what the military people do, but the comparison is, you know, there's a couple people that they belong really to the community, and it's the military, it's pastors, it's law enforcement and fire department services, and it's ball coaches. Because I got 4 kids at home and a wife. I also got 105 plus guys on this team, a full staff, an entire SMU family to answer to, and you belong to that community. But with our job, we're kind of almost like independent contractors, and a lot of times you're moving constantly, and you can get callous to it, or you can choose to embrace every move and where you are and say, you know what, we're going to be thankful for where we were, and we're going to find the best in this while we're here. We don't know how long we're going to be here, as much as we think we do, and we're going to live in the moment and enjoy it.
A few minutes ago, you talked about something. You talked about being at Auburn in the early 20 teens. You talked about being there on the field, wearing a headset when the kick six happens. And I mean, you probably realized this is insane at the time. But now we've got a decade's plus hindsight. And I think more and more you look back on that and you realize that is the total golden age of SEC football. You're going up against the best of all time in your own state in Nick Saban. And then you've also got 4 or 5 other programs that are banging out double-digit win seasons and just live bullets flying constantly. How wild was coaching in the SEC in that era?
It was wild. It was awesome. And you do pinch yourself and go, man, some of the moments you got to be a part of. Like I remember in 06 as a GA, we had Darren McFadden at Arkansas.
And Felix Jones.
And Peyton Hillis. You know what I mean? And that was my first year of coaching as a GA. And then 2010 with Cam Newton. And then you go to 13, to your point. After that game, that happened, the field storm, an hour after the game, I think we even walked up to Toomer's Corner, which we never did. We're like, we got to take this in. I'm going home, and I remember my wife didn't really get it, so I think I probably told my dad and some friends, like, this is the Stanford Cal Band is on the field game of my generation.
Right.
Like, 25 years from now on Thanksgiving and Christmas, they're going to be rolling this highlight as the top 10 all-time finishes, and they have been for 12 years now. And to get to be in it, I think, helped grow my love for the game and for the competitive aspect of it, also for my appreciation of how hard it is to win and how hard it is to get to those moments and be a part of some of those great rivalries, whether it be, to your point, that Iron Bowl, it was 1 versus 4, I think. Mm-hmm. There had never been an overtime in the history of the Iron Bowl at that time, and we were 1 second away from going to overtime. And then the kick six, so just to get to experience that is pretty special.
How frequently are you looking at examples from times like those and being able to apply them? Everyone wants to use their experience to draw on when they're trying to succeed from now moving forward. But what are some specific things, what are some specific lessons that you find yourself just regularly drawing on now that you're the head coach at SMU?
Well, I think, that's always the challenge is how do you take past experiences and not just cookie cutter them to this team, because this team is different than that team, but the experience may be similar. And so those experiences should help you maybe handle a situation better, but then you got to tailor it and custom fit it to your team. So, for example, the 2013 team, we go on this run of wins but if at any point in time, if we lose a game, once it got known, hey, we're 7-1, okay, now we're in contention. Well, you have to win every week. So the pressure just builds every week. And then there was the Georgia game, and then there's the Iron Bowl, and then there's the SEC title game. And if you slip up one time, there is no national title game. You know what I mean? There is no SEC championship. Then you come to here, well, my second year here, we hadn't won a championship in 40 years since Eric Dickerson was playing. And we start out 2-2. We lose to Oklahoma on the road. Like the games we lost, people probably would have said we'd have lost. And we start our conference season. Well, it ended up we had to run the table and go 8-0 in our conference just to make the conference championship game because Tulane and Memphis's records were up there. So now you're midway through your season and you're 4-0 in the league and you're going, we got 4 games left and we can't afford a loss. Being in a situation like that helps you draw upon how do you get your team focused and prepared each week as you get closer to the goal of a championship and not lose sight of staying present because, hey, if we don't beat whoever it is this week, the next week doesn't matter. Like each week gets bigger and bigger and bigger. Same thing this year happened in the ACC. Like down the stretch, trying to get to Charlotte, we had no room for error to get to Charlotte, and we had definitely no room for error to make the playoff. So having those 3 scenarios are all very similar experiences, but 3 totally different teams. And how you handle them isn't exactly cookie cutter to each team. You got to know your team. You have to know the experience. And now how do I handle it with this group to where I can focus them on, man, there's a lot of excitement. All you hear is, well, if we can win the next 3 games this, and as soon as you get ahead of yourself, you're going to stumble. And those experiences help you as a coach in the growth you take. Okay, this year's team, this is what they need to hear to get what we need to accomplish. This year's team, this is what we need to do. And I don't know, hope that answers that question a little bit.
This whole, the down the stretch part of this past year, when you realize playoffs are a real possibility, ACC championships, real possibility. There's this thing that there's this mode that coaches shift into about the time the playoff committee starts releasing their rankings. And it just basically becomes politicking. Mm-hmm. And it's almost like you're reading off a PR one sheet of, well, here's what we've done, here's our notable accomplishments. And the public learns to sort of filter it out accordingly. Okay, but every given year, there's someone who's really telling the truth out there, and then there are other people who are just saying what they're saying because they're wearing the logo on the polo. Yeah. So you get to the ACC championship game. Doesn't go your way in the end. So I've got you giving your perspective. You got DeBoer doing the same. You got Kiffin doing the same. You got Shane Beamer doing the same. Sometimes, maybe one day in your career, you'll find yourself in a position where we probably don't deserve to be in, but I'm going to try anyway. However, I can tell you didn't feel that way this past year. Yeah. And so there's this longing, I would assume, inside to say, all right, look, SMU deserves to be in here, but I'm dead serious. I'm not just saying this. Like, SMU deserves to be in there.
Me.
Yeah, I was watching, I remember watching at the time the post-game press conference in Charlotte. And you just lost. Like, there's still the fog of the game still surrounding you, and yet you have to go into this press setting and not even talk about the Clemson game. You're talking about why we should be in the playoff, mm-hmm. and then it's like, they don't care what I say anyway. But if they do, just know I'm not just saying this. We actually really do deserve to be in. How weird was that whole 11 or 12-hour period?
It was weird. It was surreal to find yourself in those positions. As a coach, to your point, you kind of have no choice. You have to fight for your team. And that's why, as coaches, we don't get mad at other coaches when they say whatever they say because, man, they're just fighting for their team. That's our job as a coach, is to fight for our team. I knew when the initial rankings came out last year, and we were, I think, 13th or 14th. We were just one outside, but like, they did rank us ahead of some of those SEC schools originally. I mean, on one hand, I was like, man, I'm appreciative they gave us our program the respect of we're right there. At the same time, you looked at it and go, we probably have to win the league, in all fairness, right? And so to get there, to get to that point where we'd gone undefeated in our conference, we had beaten like 3 ranked teams when we beat them that were then no longer ranked. And don't even get me started on how ranked teams should matter or not matter because they're ranked by people's opinion. So it's not even a fair baseline. But anyways, hearing, just knowing how it went down and knowing that at some point, I know the leagues. I've been in those leagues. I get it. Some leagues are stronger than others. There's always those arguments. But at some point, it does matter. Did you win? Did you win the games that you could win and were on your schedule? And did you earn the right to be in? And I felt like 100% we had earned the right to be in. And then more importantly, we were in going into that weekend. So if the committee's already saying we're in, you can't punish us for playing in a championship game when 2 or 3 of these schools you're saying could jump us by not qualifying for their championship game. That to me where it becomes the integrity of our sport. Like, what do we want our sport to look like in 5 or 10 years? This decision could shape that. But to have to be in that position, look, if we win the game, we don't have to be in that position. So as a competitor, you always realize we could have just handled it ourselves. But It was not a fun position to be in. At the same time, I felt it. And the gravity of that moment in Charlotte, to your direct question, was I had just left a locker room where I could feel our guys who just lost a great game by a last-second 56-yard field goal to a team that had won 8 of the last 10 by like an average of 23 points in that league. I could feel their disappointment was that we didn't win the ACC, which we really wanted to do. But their real disappointment was they all felt like 12 hours from now they were going to realize we just lost our chance at the playoff. And as a coach, that's what really was weighing heavy on me.
First off, I can't believe he hit that kick. I was on a rental car bus, and I'm watching like this. I'm saying, "There's no."
I got right behind him. As soon as it left his foot, I took my headset off and handed it. It was like a no-doubter off the bat. Like as soon as he kicked it, you just knew he got all of it.
You hit on something, so I don't want to ignore this. You just said something that if I had an actual drum in my studio, I would bang the drum as I talk about the whole ranked wins concept. Mm-hmm. So I've always been of the opinion, although it would be imperfect, that we should have a system that defines the value of the game you played the day you play it. And there could be some wiggle room if I play you early in the year and no one thinks SMU is worth anything, but then you go on to go on a run and I beat you by 7 early in the year, maybe that win I got could increase in value. But what I detest is I play 23rd ranked SMU midway through the year, I beat you 49-13, your season goes off the rails, and retroactively, I don't get credit for beating you. I don't get credit for you being ranked. I don't get credit for basically knocking you off kilter. And at the end of the whole thing, some committee member is going to say, that's not really a quality win. Once upon a time, we thought it was, but it's not. Nothing's changed since they played the game, mind you. The game was the game. I've hated that forever. I don't know if you got a system that's alternate to that. I've hated that.
Well, I don't think ranked wins should, as long as ranking is done, like I vote in the coaches poll. I get there's an AP poll, and I get there's a committee. But as long as ranking is done by people's opinions, which is fine, the human element of our game is great, then that can't be the barometer, though, that we measure a ranked win. To your point, BYU beat us here in week 3. We weren't ranked. But later in the year, we were top 10. Well, do they get credit for a ranked win or not? We go on the road at Louisville, which was probably the catapulting win of our season. We just beat Florida State at home. Nobody knew they were going to go 2-10. And we just beat them 42-16. We don't get a lot of credit for that. Well, we go to Louisville, they're ranked. We went on the road at a top 25 Louisville. That's a big win. But later in the year, because they stumble at Stanford, that's no longer a ranked win. You know what I mean? And then you have the committee ranking teams late in the year, and they choose to rank an Illinois over a Syracuse or a Louisville or a Duke. Well, that helps one league and hurts the other. And so we kept hearing, well, they have ranked wins. They have ranked wins. Well, like, to me, there's got to be a better way to gauge what power is. You know, we don't have a consistent system, you know, like an RPI, or as much as I don't think people didn't like the BCS. They didn't like the idea that deep down there was just 2 teams.
Yeah.
Okay. So if you have let's all as college football, let's get the 4 main leagues and say, what's important? You know, road wins, are they important? I don't know. Are they? You know, 10 wins a year, is that important? Like, pick the 4 to 5 data points that we say this is the most fair way to judge the strength of a team, and put it in your computer and let that thing spit it out and tell you if it was a good win or not. You know, I don't want to lose the human element, but when you have, I said this back when I was kind of having to politic for SMU, I vote in the coaches poll and it's hard. I have a lot of respect for the committee. They have a hard decision. When they're picking between SMU and Alabama and Indiana, and at the end, that's hard. But it's also not fair to them or to us to have a committee of people that are current sitting ADs in certain conferences. How about let's pick 8 people, 2 from the SEC, Big Ten, Big 12, and ACC, former coaches that are retired, they're equal distribution on how they're represented, and they're former ball coaches. So they know what looks good and what doesn't. You know, that could be a committee if we're going to use a committee, to just give it some fair and unbiased, because good people can still be biased. If you put me on that committee, I was putting SMU in, right? And so when your committee chair is an AD of a power school in one of the conferences that has schools in, it just feels like it's impossible for that. So I don't love the ranked wins deal just because it can be controlled by people's bias.
It ended up working out for you. But I would imagine, in lieu of something we were talking about a little while ago, if it's out of your control, it's out of your control.
Mm-hmm.
You're trying to control the controllables. And for you, that meant I can control how I deal with this team, whether they make it, which they did. But there was also this scenario B where they don't make it. And I remember watching Mike Norvell the year before when they get shut out. And they got that live feed, which is debatable in and of itself to have, and his head just sinks. And then you know, but he's got to talk to his team. He's got to deal with them right now because it's not like the season's over. They're going to go play a game. It was only like 11 or 12 hours, but you knew leading up one thing or another could happen. How much did you have to prepare yourself? If the worst is to happen, I got to straighten up quick. I got to deal with these guys.
That's the job as a leader. To your point, that's why we didn't have a watch party. You know, I was available to jump on with Quinn Kessinger, I think, or whoever it was on ESPN once we were in.
Right.
And we had a team meeting after that and celebrate, but we weren't going to have a watch party for that thing. You know, we were talking about learning from past experiences earlier. Well, the year before, on a smaller scale, we had won our league, and it was us or Liberty was going to get the New Year's Six bid. And we literally on Saturday night in New Orleans are beating Tulane, celebrating the first conference championship in 40 years. And by 1 o'clock on Sunday, we're realizing we're not going to the Fiesta Bowl. You know, we're going to the Fenway Bowl. And I had to walk into a room and try to make sense of that all for our players. So fortunately, I'd had that experience. I really didn't want to do that again. And, you know, but that's the position we put ourselves in. And I've said this, people ask me, did you want to go, do you think it's fair to go? I think road playoff games are awesome for college football. And we had to go in one of the hardest environments and got our teeth kicked in. But you know what, if we didn't want to go on the road, we should have beat Clemson. But I still think it's good for college football. Same thing. We had our chance to not put it in someone else's hands, and we didn't. So that was a hard 12 hours. I didn't sleep well. I was really worried. And it was a really cool moment to not only see our name called because we were in and our players get to experience something they'd worked so hard for, but just to not have to stand in front of them and do that other speech.
I know you're not thinking like this in the time, but like for my dad's generation, the story of SMU would have just been NCAA scandal, then it ends for a while. I didn't live through that. So my generation watches like the 30 for 30 documentary, which is one of the best they produced, by the way. Loved it. Probably could recite lines from it. But still, SMU had just come back as a workable, functioning football program. And it was like June Jones, and let's just see how it works out. Then you've got another generation that is removed entirely from both of those eras. And like their first perception of SMU is a playoff contender. SMU's in a power conference. SMU, for your dad's and your granddad's generation, is in a place that probably they told you they'd never be again. And so, yeah, the playoff game, you make it, you lose, it's one and done. But at the same time, you ever just stop to think about where this program is now and how, like, impossible that would have seemed 1, 2, 3 decades ago?
Yeah, it's hard to put into words. I'm getting chills hearing you say all that. Just because I know how big this year was to so many generations of fans here at SMU, so many people that never thought they'd see that day again. You know, when that story happened, that's what's been talked about for 30 or 40 years. And that's kind of defined our program. We lost a generation of fans because of it, literally, because there wasn't a program for 2 years, and then for 2 decades it was 1 and 2 wins every year. You're not going to really solicit a lot of fans when you're not winning. And so to have ourselves now where it's cool to go to SMU and we're filling the stadium and the city of Dallas is embracing us, and then to go out and kind of validate that by what we did in our first year in the ACC and making the playoff, to me it closes that chapter on SMU's history to where everyone loves to keep talking about 38 years ago, this is the anniversary and da-da-da-da-da. We have accomplished something that allows that group, the older generation who remembered the good old days, to say, wow, I never thought I'd see this again. And I saw grown men and women weeping, you know, when we got into the ACC or when we did what we did this year. But also there's a new generation of fan that all they know now is, well, in the last 6 years, SMU's won more games than anybody in the state of Texas. And I just saw SMU in the playoff. And it's cool to wear the Mustang or the Triple D on my chest. It's cool to go to SMU. That is all changed. And so I'm hoping that this year, us breaking through allows us to close the chapter on that 30 for 30, the Pony XS chapter, if you will, and write a new chapter, have a new documentary come out in the next year that is more celebratory about the climb back. Because it's been a long climb back for a lot of people with this program. You mentioned June Jones. There were so many other coaches well before me and players well before our players that did so much and didn't get to experience the success we're having now. But if it wasn't for them, we wouldn't be here.
Everybody's used to watching college football, myself included, and every brand that's a big brand has been established for generations. Tennessee football has been Tennessee football since way before I was born. It's pretty rare that you see a brand that was irrelevant for part of your childhood scale. Like, it's just because college football is so set, like it's so old as an entity, and yet SMU's parked in this really unique position where they were that at one point, and then what happened happens, but also like the plate tectonics of college football shifted to where not only does the program sort of have a rebirth, then there's this period, and then all of a sudden there's an opportunity to jump into the ACC. No one could have ever seen that coming in a million years. I don't care how much foresight you had. It's an actual opportunity for a program to sort of rescale in the modern age of college football, and I don't know where else that would have happened. Like Clemson doing what they did under Dabo was as close to me as a major program has come to doing that in my lifetime. But even then, Clemson mattered way before Dabo got there. Clemson was a factor in my mind way before he got there. He just showed people you could do it at a different level at Clemson. This is a totally different deal.
I agree, and it's surreal. I mean, they use the word death penalty because that's what it was with our program so much, and now this is almost like the resurrection, things that you just don't think are going to happen. It took a lot of people for 20, 30 years kind of lifting this program and pulling this program along when it was really lifeless, you know, from an athletic standpoint, from a university standpoint. But I agree with you. I mean, rarely do you see a new brand become really, really relevant. Clemson is a great example. You look at what Boise's done, but it's taken them like 2 or 3 decades. Right? I mean, it's been the last 20, 25 years since Chris Peterson was there and they beat Oklahoma in that big moment, and now look where it's established. We did have a brand that was established, but there was such a big gap that the majority of people today that love and celebrate college football, me and you included, had no experience in the old glory days of SMU. No one knows that Doak Walker played at SMU. No one knows that SMU's claimed national titles, and hardly anybody knows the college Eric Dickerson. Everybody knows the NFL single-season rushing leader and Hall of Famer. And so for there to be that big a gap, everything had to line up perfectly. And to your point, nobody could have expected that we would get such great alignment at the university and have such an infuse of just support financially and just in general, just alignment and support to help us get what we need to do to win, to be in a facility like this, to then do what we had to do to get in the ACC, and then on top of it to win at the level we have so far, to kind of just throw our brand right back in there and say what could be over the next 5 to 10 years.
So now you got a lot of players that come back from the team that just did historic things. You got a lot of coaches on your staff that are retained from doing historic things. But we also know, looking at the history of the sport, progress is never just totally linear. A failure is never totally linear. It just looks like a stock market chart. So how do you make sure people understand that you don't start from where you left off last year? You start right back at the ground floor, and whether you win 6 games or 12 games is going to be totally dependent on this. And outside of thematical elements and lessons learned, we can't take anything from last year with us.
Yeah, that's the challenge, right? And success is hard. Sustained success is even harder. That's why some of the coaches, like you see what Nick Saban did for so long, like it's awe. You just look at it in awe, like how did you do it for that long at such a high level? But that's what our goal is to do here. And so, but you learn from the past. So like as we were making the jump to a power conference, no school had ever gone better than 1-1 in conference play, and we go 8-0. Well, beforehand, looked at 2 people that I think in the last decade have done it the best, and that was Kyle Whittingham at Utah and Gary Patterson at TCU. Like they took programs and had winning seasons, not even in their league, just a winning record their first year. I think one went 7-6 and the other one went 8-5. Well, then you look, to your point, the next year they both had losing seasons. As a matter of fact, Utah had back-to-back losing seasons. But then year 3 or 4, they shot up to 11 and 12 wins and started winning the Big 12 and the Pac-12. And their programs were sustained for a long time after that. There is a process to it. The fact that we had such a good year in year one guarantees us nothing for this year. As a matter of fact, it's going to make this year even harder. But we have about a 3 to 5 year window where we can build the momentum and the process to where we want to be one of those programs that every year is a preseason top 15 team and looked at in the ACC like Clemson is looked at in our league now over the last 10 to 15 years. And I think what helps us both with retention of players and staff is you do this long enough, the programs that, man, they just had a great year or two, but it's going to be hard to sustain it. And the ones that maybe have the resources, the good fortune of geography and all the other things that, they could stick around for a while. And I think all of us here feel this has all the ingredients of a program that can stick around, whether it be the geography for recruiting, the support of our donors, the city, the facilities, the things we need, the league we're in. If we do it right, we can build a sustainable winner and a brand that stays back where we're hopefully getting it.
I kind of wanted to wrap on this. Different places, different coaches rather, have different reputations for how easy or hard it is to work for that guy. Some places, it's just known you're in at 5:30, you're out at 10:30 every night. Your reputation, although you guys aren't checking out at lunch every day, is one where it's easier to work for him. It's demanding, but there's also a lot of purpose behind how the time is used around here to where you're going to see your family more than once or twice a week. How'd you kind of land at that? How do you make that work when there are some other guys out there and there's some other programs out there who, I may see Dad once a week, maybe if I'm lucky, and that's if I'm up at 10:30 at night when he gets home.
Happy people win more. And that's not just an opinion. There's some studies out there that'll prove that. Now, happiness is fleeting. Happiness and joy, it's a whole other conversation. But happy people win more. And so I look at it like this. Yeah, in our business, there's for a long time been this badge of honor that hours served equal output delivered. And they just don't. Like, here's the deal. If we work from 5 a.m. to midnight every day, 6-7 days a week, and we don't win, they're going to replace us.
Right.
And if we win, they're not. And if we work from 7 or 8 a.m. to 5 or 6 in the off season, and in season we don't have office hours. It's whatever it takes to get it done, whatever that is. And we win, they're going to keep us, and if we lose, we don't. And so, to your point, we want to have a high expectation program. We want everyone to have high expectations of themselves and of their job. We want to try to do it at a high level. We want to be always pushing the envelope of how can we do it better than we've done it before. At the same time, if we're really good at our jobs, we don't have to be inefficient and take forever. And our families should be part of our lives. And there are times of years where they're not as much, and there's others where they can be, and there's sacrifices they make, and there's things they get to do that others don't. And so we've never really said, man, we got to be here from this time to this time, because every year, every team's different. It's like, hey, whatever it takes, that's what we're going to do. And if it takes staying until 10 p.m. one night, great. And if the next time we can leave at 7, great. Like, how do we do our job the best we can with the people we're with and still have enough balance? There has to be margin in your life. I'm not good if I'm exhausted and grinded into the ground. I'm just not going to be at my best week 11. I'm going to be tired week 11 no matter what. But if I've had no margin throughout the season or no margin in the off season, I'm not going to be at my best. I'm not going to be as happy, and we're not going to be as successful over long term. That's just my belief. Everyone's different. And so, don't get it wrong. We're trying to compete to beat everybody we play. We want to be elite at what we do. But I don't think there's a cookie cutter way to doing that.
Rhett Lashlee, this was awesome, man.
Appreciate it.
Appreciate it.
Yep.